Right, a very warm welcome back. We're in Johannesburg and Sandton today, and we're talking Afri-Cities 2015, a big summit taking place in the city in 73 days' time, and it affects all of us in one form or another, so be part of this conversation. And Morning Live SABC, hashtag TNA BizBrief. We're going to pick up your thoughts and your questions shortly, but we want to start with the audience that's here, and we go to table number 7, where we'll find Thabo Sipuma, who has a question.
My question is the African continent, the population of African continent, the majority are women and youth. And unfortunately, on the panel, we don't have either of the two. Why is that? And also, I wish the panel could also talk about the quality service delivery by our municipalities, which is one of the key issues. Thank you.
All right, okay. Well, the first part, I'm young.
Including me.
Exactly. But we were also hoping to have a lady councillor from Mauritania to join us on the panel, but at the last minute was unable to join us. So we were hoping to have representation. But also, it makes sense if you see who's sitting here. We've got the Secretary General of the
United Cities and Local
United Cities
Africa, yes.
Local Government. So that's why it's here. Afri-Cities is their flagship program. The host city is Johannesburg. And guess who's mayor? Councillor Parkstown. And Councillor Manyoni represents all of South Africa's local government associations. So that answers part of your question. Your youth, I don't know. But if you can deal with the other issues. Yeah.
Well, there are times I get away with being youth. So I've been called young many times. To sometimes think that I can survive. But I think it's true that it's very important that we build a new breed of local government leaders amongst the young people of this country. Africa is a youthful continent, and we need more and more young people to participate. And I think that it's a critical challenge to at least South African political parties as we contest elections next year to say how many young people are being brought into the system. And by bringing those young people into the system, how do you ensure that they assume leadership and prominent roles so that you're able to build that new breed of local government leaders? I can say that amongst the teams that we work with in the city of Johannesburg, there's always consistently been people under 35 in all mayoral committees that we've had. And in that way, we've continuously built that sort of cadre of young people that are able to contribute to local government and its future. With regards to issues of service delivery, I mean, there are two issues related to service delivery. The first relates to the need to ensure that we build the institutional capacity of our municipalities, but not only the institutional capacity, that we're able to create appropriate financing mechanisms for our local authorities to be able to undertake their responsibilities. If you think about the architecture of local government throughout Africa, it's not the same. The tax base is not the same. It's not even the same in South Africa. If you think about tax bases and therefore the ability of municipalities to undertake similar level of responsibilities, you have your larger municipalities that to a large extent are, I can't even say self-sufficient. They still confront challenges, but at least they're able to generate a significant surplus. They're able to go into the debt capital markets to raise money to finance infrastructure and meet some of their challenges. But you've also got smaller municipalities with a relatively small tax base, if any. And these would continue to be reliant on subsidies to be able to meet their challenges. And I think that when we're talking about delivering services on the African continent, we need to look at resourcing these local authorities, not only within the states themselves, not only within the countries in which we operate, but accept that we're part of a global architecture of local government that's emerging. The world will be meeting next week at the UN General Assembly to be discussing these issues. One of the goals, which is a victory for local government, is Goal 11 that's focusing on local government, because there's a recognition that you need to create the financing mechanisms and the institutional mechanisms to support your ability of local authorities to meet their obligations.
All right. A tweet has come through. Do you want to answer that?
Yes, because this is one way of answering this question. But I want another way, which for me is the most important way. It is said in my tribe that what you do for me, without me, you do it against me. It means that the culture of entitlement is not a culture that builds this continent. We need to move from entitlement to responsibility. It means that you don't wait, as Kennedy was saying, we don't wait to say what this country has done for me. You just participate in building the response for yourself. And it is very critical to move from this entitlement culture to a citizenry culture. Of course, it doesn't mean that we don't need grants. It doesn't mean that we don't need support. But it means that all start by me as a taxpayer, and it means that everybody should pay his fair share of taxes, including the multinationals. And this is where we are saying that local governments should be empowered to take this new stand to make people more responsible on their own lives. It is, I'm preaching, but it's very critical to move from this entitlement culture to a more responsive culture.
Okay, it sort of came through a bit earlier on, and I just want to add to this a little bit via this tweet from Zaka Hemp, who says that we have failed the Millennium Development Goals regarding poverty, and we're into the sustainable development era now. 2063, are we going to meet these goals? Are we going to get rid of poverty, inequality, and unemployment by 2063? Gentlemen? Because this is, I guess, really at the heart of the matter of the most citizens on the continent. Let me start with you.
Well, yes, we can, if we want. And if we have self-confidence that we will. I repeat, nobody will build this continent, and there is no international community that can save Africa but the Africans themselves. I'm sure that if we shy away from the begging position, if you start trying our best on this continent, remember, it is in this continent that we invented mobile money. When did we get to the ICT, to the extent that we can invent mobile money? It's because this Safaricom, they realized that they have a society that have a functioning. And since they saw that in this society there are solutions that are needed, they reflected from the society and they invented the mobile money so that the mobile phone number become a banking number. How many capacities building on our own society we can build to reach the world? Because M-Pesa is now implementing in Romania, in Hungary, and in many countries in Europe. It means that this continent has the capacity to work for itself. Yes, we can.
Okay, Councillor Manyoni. Mr. Mbassi has talked about citizenry being responsible, but I think one of the challenges that we face is this space of trust between local government and its citizens. He spoke about how do we get people to buy into these programs and participate in these programs when this trust isn't quite there. How do we fix that?
I think this is also linked to what Mbassi, the issue that you raised earlier about poverty. The key issue there is looting. Earlier I said the illicit flight of capital from Africa continent, the avoidance of tax, are issues that we have to deal with, particularly by national states, if you basically are going to grow the wealth of Africa. And obviously, the looting of your minerals, particularly in the middle, Central Africa. The same thing when it comes to building of confidence. To pay tax, to be part of the responsible citizenry, you basically need to have confidence in the leadership that is basically managing your finances, managing your welfare. And the best way to deal with that is the issue of transparency. People need to be able to say, yes, there is transparency. We can see where exactly our efforts, our money are going to. And we have to deal with this issue. And we have to deal with it not only as a local government, but also as central states, including us as citizens. You know, the only time Mbassi says you need to take responsibility and not wait for service delivery. The only time when we say vuga zenzele, it's when we start doing things for ourselves. Most of the time it's when we start doing illegal things. All the time we wait for delivery from government. But when it comes to looting also, as citizens and so on, I think I'm just trying to indicate to you, it works both ways. We need to have confidence in ourselves as citizens in terms of building our own country and in terms of building our own cities. And it needs a responsibility from both the governors and obviously the citizens.
All right, okay, let's go to table 13 where we're going to find Kenneth. Kenneth?
Good morning. As part of the Agenda 2063, it calls for unleashing the potential of rural women and youth. As a rural child who grew up on support from rural farming, selling of cattle for school fees, when I look in this modern day, that dependency on that rural farming has gone away. And yet it was one of the main activities that mothers and children, youth participated in. The dependency is now more on fruit and veg and your shops, your ShopRite, to supply the daily stuff like beetroot and all that. And I would like to put a challenge to our mayor to launch Buy Rural, where you create rural hubs and then within the city you provide a platform to buy, whether it's beetroot from the rural areas, whether it's cassava from Nigeria, but basically put in a system that allows and creates a platform for rural products to be sold in the city. And the population is already there to go buy these rural home products. But the market is not there. We depend on European modern shopping systems. That's the question number one. Hashtag Buy Rural. The second question is basically one of the call for action in the agenda is the African passport. And then within that African passport, it talks of abolishment of visas by 2018. And I'm just trying to find out the progress on that, or more enlightenment on that. Enlightenment of the migration, for example, happening in Europe. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, two great points. Hashtag buy rural. Where are we with empowering our rural producers in cities like Johannesburg?
You know, there are two things that are going to happen in the short term. National government is going to publish an integrated urban development framework, which urban development framework includes a chapter that deals with the urban-rural linkages. And these rural-urban linkages relate to production, to mobility, to logistics, to how people live and interface between rural and urban. And it's a very important chapter in how we're going to discuss our urban future. It is how we link it to our rural existence. And I think that's that's an important part of how we're going to have to look at it. And I think we should, as South Africans, participate in that conversation about building the urban and rural linkages. The second, of course, is that there are practical programs that we run in our respective cities that support rural linkages. I mean, we own a fresh produce market, the largest market on the African continent, in City Deep, and we run programs that facilitate trade with particular areas in the rural parts of our country to ensure that they're able to provide the produce that's necessary, including building the capacity of emerging farmers. So we take responsibility from a market point of view to build the capacity from a farming point of view so that we're able to create access for those people into the market, because this is where, in fact, the bulk of the trade happens. The price setting happens at our market, and we understand that it's our responsibility to go into Limpopo and say, this is how we can assist you to gain access to market, and on the basis of that, to be able to trade and interface with our cities.
Mr. Mbassi, I'm going to ask you about the visa thing just now, but a tweet just to follow on this theme a little bit more. Hloni Nyetanyane says, is there city-to-city trade amongst African cities like they do between New York and Beijing? Are we seeing more? We've got this rural-urban linkages inside countries, but are we seeing city-to-city across the continent?
Not enough. Not enough. As I was saying, I mean, the challenge that's been put to Johannesburg is how do you facilitate the network of strategic cities from which the different regions would be able to grow? How do you look at the Brazzaville-Kinshasa nexus, so to say, as a platform from which you facilitate trade and development with the broader Congo area and the central parts of the continent? And you need to use your cities as platforms. Think about it. I mean, we've got in Gauteng strategic port cities. We run the largest inland port in Johannesburg, in City Deep, that trades into the African continent, but not enough. We've got the OR Tambo, which is a strategic airport right on our doorstep, really in Ekurhuleni, that is a strategic platform from which we should facilitate that trade. It is the ability of the cities to build those linkages that would enhance that trade that should happen. In as much as you have your strategic port cities, Nelson Mandela Bay, Cape Town, Richards Bay, eThekwini, as strategic cities from which we should facilitate the trade. So we shouldn't always sit as cities and say the solutions are going to be resolved in a heads of state summit. Reality is that trade happens in our cities. Where people establish their businesses and trade from is in our cities. And we need to create the platforms for them to know that if I interface with the inland port in Johannesburg, I can take a railway link into Harare, into Kinshasa, and different parts of the continent, and trade would happen and be facilitated by the cities that facilitate custom and other initiatives that are going to be important in enabling that trade.
All right, so this visa issue.
There is a link. There is a link between the visa issue and what we just touched on. There's no such thing as a national economy. It doesn't exist. National economy is statistic tables and the central bank. That's it. The real economy is local economies. And the local economy is about building local markets, building the link between cities and the hinterland, and through them relying on entrepreneurs and the local authorities and the local government to try and grow this market locally, and then go and meet the other markets to form a network of market that will then go and compete with other network of market, either in the region or at the world level. Because all business is local. And this the tendency of our national government to deny this reality that all business is local, well, business people know that their business is local. They know that it is at local level, with the local entrepreneur, decision makers at the local level, that you have this capacity. And these people at the local level want free movement. And President Sankara used to say, every morning, African people put down the walls that the colonial master erected to divide Africa. And every evening, African state put up these walls. And this is what we want now to address seriously. When we organized Afri-Cities in 2026 in Nairobi, one of the key requirements of the mayors was, please remove visas between African countries if you want that this continent is united. We beg our national government to seriously consider freeing African people again. And West Africa, ECOWAS, has given the example. And we don't see so many difficulties stemming from the fact that in ECOWAS, you can move from Lagos to Dakar with your ID card. What is it so difficult for our continent to get rid of these borders inherited from colonial masters? If you take the example of Germany and France, 20 million people killed in the war between these two countries. And one day, they decided that the borders should be removed. Not that they don't have borders, but they ignore it. And they free the movement of the people and goods across this border for the benefit of all the communities. Why don't we do that?
Well, why don't we?
Why don't we?
Yes.
Because we are still. Remember what I told you. This farmer in Senegal, who said to President, when do you remove this independence, replacing the colonial master by the African masters, for us to become free? This is the response.
Okay. We're going to take another break, and after that we'll take more of your tweets, and also we'll hear from, is it Hatla Ntene, who's here in Sandton. Stay with us for that.